morning, everyone. I was carried away in the reading, and I just want to correct something that Reverend Lori said. Not that she made a mistake; that's not possible. Okay, but I gave her a false impression this morning. I did not select that reading. That reading selected us this morning. It appears to me sometimes that even though if you saw my office, you would think that a tribe of camel herders lived in there because it's so messy from time to time. Because I get involved in so many things and I just pull it all out and put it into organized stacks, and then a while later realize that I need to reorganize the stacks. They're not queued up properly. But it seems to me at times that on Saturday night, Sunday morning, the muse goes into my office and takes the things that I need and just moves them slightly out of place where they were. So that I always go to sleep Saturday night just knowing that Spirit knows what it wants to do and what it wants to say. And my job is to be open to that. And then I get up early Sunday morning and I sit and I listen. And I'll turn and there'll be a book sticking off the shelf in a haphazard manner, and I'll grab it. And that book I picked up opened to that very page. Boom, it was there. As well as these other two books that we're going to talk about today. First one, you may remember, it was very popular in the 60s and the 70s, The Art of Loving, Erich Fromm. Anybody remember that? It was originally written in 1956, and I think I had to read it as part of a high school course on love and marriage, which was funny because I went to an all-boys parochial school, and the class on love and marriage was very interesting because everybody that was teaching it was single, you know. So, what do these guys know, you know? Why would I listen to them? But I just wanted to bring this to you because it's so interesting. The cover price on this book, for those of you on the bridge, it's a paperback, about 100 pages. The cover price on this book was 75 cents. Okay? And if you look at the pages, they're just perfectly, you know, turning yellow at the edges. Just one of those treasures that you might find at a used bookstore like that. There's a great one if you ever get to Chapel Hill. There's a great used bookstore up there near the college on Franklin Street. And then the other book is one of my favorites, is Ernest Holmes' Living the Science of Mind. And I just want to tell you a little bit about that as we go into this. Ernest Holmes originally started the first year class of Science of Mind teaching as a correspondence course. And there was 52 lessons, and people would get a lesson and they would do their homework. Kathy, they would do their homework. And they would send their homework in. And Ernest was smart. He had it figured out. You didn't send the homework in for the last lesson, you didn't get the next one. If anybody ever did correspondence courses in the olden days, that's the way they worked. They just didn't send you lessons. Sent you a lesson, you got your homework, they grade your homework, they sent you a new lesson. And during the course of these 52 lessons, Ernest wrote commentaries on the lesson material. Very valuable. Very valuable. The commentaries from that course, that whole course costs like $400 or $500 now, if it's even still available. But the commentaries were pulled out and put into this book called Living the Science of Mind. So this is Ernest Holmes' own words or commentaries on what he was teaching. He was trying to make the teaching a little bit more accessible to us. So I just find it very, very valuable to just be able to pick up that book and start to work through it. So what we're going to talk about this morning is a little bit of combination of ideas that were given to us by Erich Fromm and ideas that were given to us through Ernest Holmes on this business of relationships. Now, I don't want you to raise your hands now, but if I could ask everybody to raise their hand that really wanted to be in a relationship with Mr. or Mrs. Right, I think most hands would go up. And if you're already in a relationship, I would say, would you like your existing relationship with Mr. or Mrs. Right to be better than it is? I think most hands would go up. And if I said, now, how many people are willing to do whatever it is that needs to be done to be in that perfect relationship with Mr. or Mrs. Right, I think less hands would go up. But still a significant portion of hands would go up. But if I gave it out as a homework assignment and asked Kathy to check, and we came back here next Sunday and I said, Kathy, how many people have called you and said, I've completed my homework assignment? It would be the usual answer. Not many, no. You see? And I'm just making fun at all of us, but making fun of myself as well. There's a difference between knowing about it and wanting it. There's a difference between knowing what ought to be done and what could be done and what should be done. But then the spiritual discipline comes in and you just got to do it. You know, you just have to go do it. So what we're going to talk about today is this magical thing in life called relationships. one of the most important things in our whole life. In many regards, one of the most important things in our whole life. Ernest Holmes says it seems like we can't live without people, but sometimes we just can't live with them. I think it was Emerson who said, "I love humanity. It's these people that are driving me crazy." So we have this thing. We are kind of social beings. We want to be with other people. We have a certain experience, perhaps, of need of being with other people. And yet, what do we really know about being with other people? What do we really know about being in love with other people? What do we really know about relationships? It's most important to us in spiritual terms. John Randolph Price, in his 40-day prosperity program, makes an interesting claim. He said, if you are not experiencing all the prosperity in your life that you would like to be experiencing, look at your relationships. Because your relationships are going to give you clues about where you really are on your spiritual path. And if you are to accept prosperity as a spiritual truth in your life, you have to advance on your spiritual path. And I thought that was most interesting the first time I read it. But now I understand relationships are about our harmony, the way that we interact and interface with each and everything. If our relationships are out of sorts, we are out of harmony with divine life. And what is the root cause of all of our problems? It is this idea of separation that we have. Separation first from God, separation secondly from one another. And it is healing those ideas of separation, which is where our spiritual growth comes in. What in the end endures? It is truth. It is love. See, all the superficial things will pass. But what will remain is love. What will remain is truth. As we said last week when we talked about what love is the experience of the presence of the unity. It is the experience of the oneness, that which we feel that we are in love with. We feel somehow unified with, whether it be another person, whether it be our pets, whether it be our plants, whether it be our country, football team, whatever. There's a certain sense of unity or oneness about it. And we realize that that sense of unity is very, very often arbitrary or artificial. You know, if you have a child in high school and they go to play a game, it's very easy as a parent to sit there and root for your kid's team and to root against the other team. But why? Just because your kid happens to be on one as opposed to the other. If your child suddenly transferred schools next week, you'd be sitting on the other bleacher, rooting for the other team. Your love, your sense of unity would have changed for some type of a very, very superficial, not enduring way. So we want to talk about love and relationships, and how do we grow spiritually in our love and relationships? If love is the experience of the presence of the unity, the greatest experience of the presence of the unity is the experience of the presence of God, because God is unity, God is oneness, God is wholeness, God is completeness. So if I am truly going to grow in love relationships, then my opportunity is to see the person or persons who I am in relationship with, whether it be a romantic relationship or whether it be a friendship or whether it be a work relationship, it doesn't matter. But when I can learn to appreciate that other person as the very presence of God in my life at this moment, and to remove anything within myself that tells me otherwise, then my relationships are my opportunity for spiritual growth. My relationships are clearly showing to me like a mirror. Life is like a mirror. I put a quote on Facebook page this morning. Life is like a mirror. It reflects back to you what you are and what you do. And Ernest Holmes tells us it would be silly to go and try to scratch the image out of the mirror. If you wanted to change it, you need to change what you're projecting into it. So we can look at our relationships then and we can say, wow, where am I on my spiritual path? Where am I with regard to experiencing this sense of unity, the presence of God in everyone and everything? And then without condemning or criticizing ourselves, which is so easy to do, we can say, okay, this is where I am. But where do I want to be? And how do I get there? So Erich Fromm tells us in the opening chapter of his work, he says, when we think about love in our society, in our present-day society, there tends to be three commonly held ideas about love that really get in the way of you and I experiencing true love in our relationships. Right? These are commonly held ideas that everybody agrees is true, and they're not true. And if you watch the way people work and the way they act and the way they behave, you will see what I'm talking about. The first idea is that my object or my goal or my desire in our society is to be loved rather than to be loving. I want to figure out how it is that I am going to get somebody else to love me. Remember I talked last week in our first awakening stages of consciousness, everything is out there and we have to figure out how to get it to us. And we go into this concept of love with that same idea that somehow love is out there and we have to get love to come to us. The second thing is that we believe that love is an object instead of a faculty. Love is something we can get, something we can hold, something we can purchase, rather than a faculty within ourselves to be developed. And the last idea that he brings us to is this idea that we spend more time trying to figure out how to fall in love and more effort trying to figure out how to fall in love than we do with figuring out how to stay in love. And that's where the real growth is. It is staying in love. So here, this first idea, then, they kind of overlap and they tie together. But love is not, in our society, it is not an art. Erich Fromm says, think of an art. Art has to be studied at the theoretical level, and then it has to be practiced. This is how we learn art. If you wanted to learn how to play the keyboard, you would take music lessons, and in those music lessons, you would learn musical theory. You would learn the mathematics of notes. You would learn about the separation of notes. You would learn about the harmonics of notes. You would learn how to put notes to make chords. You would learn scales. You would learn major scales. You would learn minor scales. You would learn all these variations theoretically. They would be presented to you in the form of the mathematical relationship of one note to another. But at some point in time, you have to sit down at the keyboard. You have to practice. You have to practice your art. You have to actually do the scales. You have to practice drills that teach you how to move your fingers so you can properly execute the theory that you learned about. If you want to be a good musician, you have to study the theory and then you have to dedicate yourselves to the practice. If you want to learn how to paint, you have to understand what makes paintings, and then you have to practice the different techniques. You have to watch Bob Ross religiously every Saturday morning. And you have to have a happy little squirrel in your pocket. It wouldn't hurt. Okay? But you have to do the very thing. You have to do the practice. And when it comes to love, we don't stop to consider that love is a faculty, an art to be developed within ourselves so that we can become loving rather than trying to figure out how to be loved. It comes from this very immature view of life that says that everything is out there and somehow I have to get it to come in here to me. So rather than developing our own art of loving, what we tend to do is figure out, how do I make myself more likely to be loved? How do I make it more likely that somebody is going to fall in love with me? I love Rita Rudner, the comedian. She said that before she met her husband, she don't know if she ever really fell in love, but she stepped in it a few times. And I think that happens to us, you know. We think we fell in love, but by God, it sure seems like we stepped in something along the way, you know, because we are looking for something to happen to us. We are trying to figure out how to get it to happen to us. How do we make ourselves more likely to succeed? We go after love as if it was a goal to be attained, something to be won. I'm going to shift just a second, and I'm going to come back to it. Ernest Holmes tells us that when we are growing up, our personalities are formed. And we may have parents who took too much care of us. They coddled us. And we never really learned how to develop as a person. We never really learned how to go out and do the things that we needed to do. For example, if we wanted to learn how to play the piano, perhaps our parents hired somebody to play the piano for us so we could hear the piano. And we never quite developed. So we take that idea into adulthood, and when we go into relationships, we are looking for somebody to come and take care of us because that's what we're used to. We may have had parents who treated us harshly, and one of two things would happen there. One is we've never developed self-confidence. We never learned that we could do the things that we needed to do, so still we're looking for somebody else to come and do them for us. Or we may overreact, we may counter the other way and say, I am going to be extremely dominating and domineering, and I am going to be assertive, and I am going to go out into the world, and I am going to show the world that I am in charge. And we take that into our relationships. So what tends to happen then is as people come together in relationships, you'll find somebody who wants to dominate and take care, to satisfy his or her own needs to feel good, and you'll find somebody else who feels like they need to be taken care of, and there you have a marriage made in hell. Right? They will come together and think that this must be love. I've fallen in it to find out later, no, I stepped in it. Okay, and it doesn't smell very good either. So we spend time at this first concept of love trying to figure out, how do I make myself more likely to fall in love, for somebody to fall in love with me? How do I make myself more appealing? How do I become a success? How do I change my body so that my body is more appealing? How do I dress so that I am more attractive? How do I learn the things that people are attracted to? Maybe people like somebody who speaks several languages, so I'll learn several languages so that when I meet people on eharmony.com, I can say, oh, I speak 7 languages fluently. And they'll say, wow, I think I love you. You see? And we do these things. One time, Lori and I had an opportunity. We were invited to one of our friends' children got married in South Carolina, and we had an opportunity to go down there to the wedding. And I won't tell you the name of the town or the name of the university because they might have an alumni who would come and get me. But there was a university there, or a college. I don't know whether it was a college or a university. But it was there, and they were having some kind of reunion at the hotel we were staying at. And they had all these old yearbooks, and they had all the history of the school out there. And it was a school for women. And primarily, it was a school for women to prepare themselves to marry military officers at the Citadel. That's what it was. See? I'm not kidding you, because if you looked at the courses that were in everything, it was home economics. There was all these things that were basically teaching women how to be acceptable wives. And when you looked at the back and they had famous alumni of the university, they advertised all of these graduates in terms of who they married. This is Mrs. Captain so-and-so or Mrs. Major so-and-so. And it was like, I looked at it and I couldn't believe it. This was 10 years ago. And I looked at it and I said, I can't believe it. It's like the whole purpose of this place was to produce wives for the military. And people were smiling. And they were happy, And they had white gloves on and big hair. And they were smiling at the prom with the cadets in their military uniforms. And I know that that's being judgmental, but what it revealed to me is what is truly important here. What is enduring? What was helping these individuals to develop themselves as an individual, as opposed to to develop an identity of the spouse of somebody? But it ties into what Eric Fromm is telling us, because we all do that. How can I make myself more lovable? The 98-pound weakling commercials years and years ago, for those of you who read comic books, they always had the poor little 98-pound weakling was getting sand kicked in his face on the beach. But if you took Jack LaLanne's course, by God, the women were going to go crazy over your new buff beach body. And we start to do these things to work in the world of appearances in order to hope that we can make ourselves somehow more lovable. To me, the epitome of this is if you happen to watch The Bachelor or The Bachelorette on TV. This is taking love in our human context and just putting it right out there for everybody to look at it and say, wow, and then deal with it. So you take a group of people of one sex and one person of the other, and you set up a competition so they can try to figure out how to make this other one fall in love with them as opposed to the rest. And then the scheming starts to take place. I sabotage the one that he or she likes the best so that he or she won't like them the best, and then I have a chance of being the one that gets the rose. And we watch that. And advertisers pay to keep it on TV because people watch that. And what it is showing us is it is showing us our twisted idea of what love is. A competition to be won. A prize to be attained. And what I need to do is to make myself more lovable, more appealing. And then somehow somebody will just absolutely fall in love with me. And then they will satisfy my needs, whatever my needs happen to be. And we spend all of our time trying to figure out how to be loved instead of how to be loving. And if you think about what happens is, two people come together and they think that they have fallen in love because they think that whatever they needed is being satisfied in this relationship. They think that they feel the way that they feel because of the other person. And when they no longer feel the way that they felt, they decide that the other person is broken. And they need to be fixed or replaced. That's all we do in this country, right? You take your car to the shop. It's $10,000 to fix. No, I'm not going to pay that. I'll get a new one. Fix or replace. That's all we do. Because we haven't learned how to be loving and how to love, and because we look on love as an object and not a faculty within us, we tend to treat it as a transaction. We tend to treat it as a transaction. So, if we're not happy in this relationship, we'll go to a different one. And we'll go to a different one. And we'll go to a different one. And there's times when that's appropriate. There's nothing wrong inherently with that. But if we are going from A to B to C to D, and we are not bothering to take the time to grow our soul, to change who and what we are, what do you think is going to happen when we get there? Okay. You are just like my last 3 wives. What is wrong with you? Who'd have thunk I could have picked 4 in a row, all the same, you know? Life's a mirror. We don't like to admit that. Life's a mirror. What you're looking at, you're looking with. So we come to this point of recognizing that that which endures is love, and that which endures is truth, and everything else is superficial. And to some degree, as Eric Fromm points out, to some degree, years ago they had arranged marriages. Now we would look at arranged marriages and say, isn't that terrible? Somebody else telling me who I should love. And yes, we would say, yes, it's terrible. Nobody else should tell you who you should love. But if your idea of love was something or someone from out there who was going to fulfill a need that you had in here, you might have been better off having somebody tell you who you should love, because you really didn't have what it took to go and be in love in the first place. So the old idea was supposedly, if you understand what love is, you can learn to love anyone. You can learn to love everyone. And if we don't understand that, then choosing who we would be in love with is kind of wasteful, because we're not choosing wisely. So we come to the understanding, and understanding is always the first step. We come to the understanding then that the human concept of love that we have grown up with, the human concept of relationships that we have grown up with, are superficial. They are out there. They are based on somehow me getting something that I don't have and bringing it to me so that my needs can be fulfilled. And when I feel like my needs aren't being fulfilled, then I can go get another or another or another different model. Started out with the 2-door sports car. Realized I needed a 4-door. Nope, maybe what I wanted was an SUV. Should have added a 4-wheel drive when I had the chance. We think of it as if we were buying a car, bringing somebody else into our lives. And what we start to recognize is what Ernest Holmes tells us, is that if we go back and look at where we came from, none of us, not one, had the opportunity to fully develop into the individual being that we are. And we can't go back and change that. You and I can't go back to our childhood and change it as much as we would like to. As much as we would like to perhaps blame the people who raised us or who influenced us. And you can make an entire industry out of that, and there are people who do that. But Ernest tells us that there aren't enough counselors, and there isn't enough time, and there's not enough money in the world for everybody to go receive the therapy that they would need to receive. He said, but the answer is very simple. What we must recognize is that we are spiritual beings. That whatever happened to us in the past may have been an experience that we have had, but we can overcome everything that has happened to us in the past by being born again. By recognizing that we are spiritual beings, that the truth of our being is spiritual in nature, and that whatever it is that we need to know and to learn and to do and to practice right now in order to recognize ourselves as a fully developed whole person, we can do that. What he's talking about is learning to love ourselves. You see, our idea of love in the human sense is that you are going to come and love me. But if I don't love me, why would you want to come and love me? Somehow I think that you are going to come and make me whole and complete, when the truth is that I am the only one who can make me whole and complete. The fact is I already am whole and complete, but I am the only one who can awaken to that. So if we wish to go into a relationship then with Mr. or Mrs. Right, the Mr. or Mrs. Right that we must develop the relationship with is the one who looks back at us from the mirror. We must first begin by learning to love and to respect ourselves as the expression of God that we are. Not as something that's broken that needs to be fixed, but as the expression of God that we are. When we start to learn that the allness of God, the fullness of God, the omniscience, the omnipresence, the omnipotence of the divine is already here and now, and there is nothing that anyone can possibly give to me from the outside that I don't already have, then I stop wasting my time trying to deal in the world of the superficial. I stop sending off the isotoner belts that will exercise my belly for me while I sleep. The pills, they're amazing. You can eat a large pepperoni pizza, wash it down with a 6-pack of beer, take 2 of these little pills, and go to bed and lose weight. I told you they don't work. Don't ask me how I know. Huh? We stop wasting time in the superficial and say, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. We whack ourselves. I could have had a V8. What this life is about learning more about what God is and what God as us is and where God is and how God is. And what this life is about is experiencing the presence of the divine. And first I have to awaken to that in myself, because I can't give to you that which I haven't already discovered in myself. But once I start to awaken to the fact that the Spirit and the presence is right here where I am, and it doesn't care about where I was, it doesn't care about what I've done, it only knows me as an expression of itself right here and right now, then I can open up my heart to know the same for you. To know the same for each and every person in my life. It's easy for us as parents to see it in our children when they're sleeping. When they're screaming, it's not so much, but when they're sleeping, we look at them and say they're little angels. When they're our grandchildren, we see it in them all the time. But can we look into the eyes of our beloved and see the presence of God? And feel the presence of God? And to go into that relationship without a sense of need that I am incomplete and somehow you have to complete me, despite what you heard from Motown. Can you go into this relationship knowing that I am a beautiful expression of God and I have nothing to receive, I only have something to give, and that is love. And you are an expression of God, and you have nothing to receive and only something to give, and that is love. And I don't need to manipulate you to get anything from you, because whatever I need, I can get from the one source of the divine. And I don't need to dominate you or control you so I can feel good about myself. I can allow you to be free and to be an individual, a fully developed person who is capable of expressing God's love to the same degree that anybody else can. And can I then each and every day expand that a little bit further for myself and for the other? And can I learn more about God by learning more about God as my beloved? Can I learn more about God by learning more about myself as the expression of God? And now my relationship, instead of being something that's going to happen to me or I'm going to fall into it or I'm going to step into it, it is a faculty of the love of God expressing itself through me. And not just with the ones I would naturally choose to love, but with everyone. Love your enemies. Can you see that they are the love and the presence of God right here and right now? This is the challenge of our spiritual growth. This is our spiritual practice. So many times when things aren't going our way, we can look at it and say, well, that's just not right. I'm not getting what I want or what I need. And instead we can look at it and say, well, it's just not right. Somehow I have to dig a little bit deeper to see the love and the presence of God right here. And I can. In the Hindu tradition of the Tantra, which is grossly mistaught in the East, in the West, it's taught as kind of indulgence, and it's not indulgence at all. It is accepting everything just as it is, as an expression of God, and not resisting it, but learning how to cooperate with whatever it is, because it too can lead us to God. But in the teachings of the Tantra, there are 3 symbols that they use to describe relationships. The first symbol is a box, a rectangle, or a square, either way. And what that represents is it represents 2 people coming together, but each one is 2 sides. Each one is 2 sides, a body and a soul, a body and a mind, if you will. And people come together in relationships, but they keep themselves separate from one another. They keep their identities separate from one another. They are together, and they are doing things together, and they are kind of exchanging things together, and they are kind of using each other to get their needs fulfilled. All of these things that we do, transactions, if you will, but we are still separate. The next symbol is the triangle. And what the triangle represents is that from time to time, the 2 individuals can momentarily lose the sense of the self, the sense of the body, if you will, an out-of-body experience. That we come together and for a moment in time, a brief moment in time, we completely forget that you and I are separate. We forget that I am body and mind. And there is just that momentary glimpse of this experience of the unity, of the oneness of life. And that glimpse is perfect, because that glimpse lets us know that it's there, you see. The ecstasy is there. The mystical experience is there. The experience of the unity is there. If I can just get out of its way. And the last symbol is the circle. When the 2 souls and the 2 bodies have come together and they are truly one, when they truly recognize that there is no self and other, there is only one. And you and I are in relationship in this one. And in fact, there is no you and I to be in relationship in the one. There is only God. There is only God. You see, at that moment, I've lost a sense of self. I've lost a sense of me getting what I need out of this whole deal. I've lost this sense of ownership, that somehow my significant other is something that I dominate or control, or I can show off as a trophy. And all of these ideas, they just go away because they're all wrong. I was going to say something else. And what we do is we open up to the fact that there is never been and there never will be anything more than the love of God, expressing itself perfectly. Expressing itself perfectly as the costume that it wears when it calls itself Jim, as the costume that it wears when it calls itself Lori, as the costume that it wears when it calls itself by your name. All that there is the inevitable, enduring, everlasting love of God. That's it. That is it. We can understand it. Now we must practice it. We must practice it. As the piano student must sit down at the keyboard and do the drills, you and I must practice being loving. We must practice the art of love. We must practice the faculty of love. We must start with our own self by literally dissolving our own self into the fullness of God. God never does anything out of a sense of need, because God needs nothing. God does everything out of a sense of fullness and of giving and expressing. And my desire is to allow that to give of itself through me. Right now, Eric Fromm wrote this book more than 50 years ago. And he said there's only one sensible solution to the problems of humankind. Double bonus point question. What do you think the answer is? Love, right? The Beatles had it. Love. Right now, it's impossible for you and I, as compassionate, sensitive, caring human beings, to look around the world and not be aware of the fact that the experience of pain and suffering exists. And we must also be aware of the fact that the experience of pain and suffering is not necessary. And we also must be aware of the fact that to continue to work into the world of effect of the superficial will not resolve the issues. Jesus said, the poor you shall always have with you. As long as the same level of consciousness that created the poverty tries to fix it, you will always have poverty with you. But love is the answer. Being God's instrument of love, practicing the art of loving, enhancing your faculty to love, allowing God's love to flow through you as a healing balm into this consciousness on this plane of existence we call Earth, is a sacred experience. It is not a hobby. It is not a nice to. It's not a someday I'll get around to. It is a sacred experience. So I invite you then, as we go forward together as a loving spiritual community, I invite you then to embrace your ability to love as a gift from God that helps you to grow your soul and helps all of us to be the conduit through which the entire planet has a greater desire for love. We don't need any more wars. We don't need any more hate. We don't need any more riots. What we need is a few souls who are willing to open themselves up and say, let it come through me. I am here. Put me in. I'm ready to be love. I believe that we all came here today together. Whether we're here physically in this room, whether we're here through the teleconference, whether we're hearing this through CDs. I think we came here today because our hearts wanted to hear this. This is my prayer. That Spirit will reveal to me what it needs to say and bring to us those who want to hear it. I hope that we can all go forward for the rest of this week, and when we look in that mirror without any sense of arrogance, but with a complete sense of humility, recognize that there is the love of God. And when you take the hand of your beloved to look him or her in the eye and to recognize that this is the very love of God. And when you bounce your children on your knee and your grandchildren and your neighbor's children and strangers' children and just children, to know that this is the love of God that has come here in that little person to learn how to be a whole being, and you are the example. Life is a sacred adventure. It is a great deal of fun if we can look at it that way. Our job every day, and this is a great paying job, by the way, our job every day is to simply get up and see more of God's love in the world. And what could be better than that? And what is the reward other than experiencing more and more of the presence of God each and every day, everywhere around us in our lives? You are Mr. and Mrs. Right. Stop looking anywhere else. And so it is. And now we're going to close. Instead of me doing a treatment, I want to read to you the treatment that Ernest Holmes wrote in this book, in his chapter, Getting Along with People. Because I am one with God, I am one with all people. Because I am one with life, I am one with everything that lives. I feel my union with people and with nature. I feel that I belong to life. I love life and I enter into the joy of living. I enter into companionship with others, into cooperation with them, and I know that something within me reaches out and embraces the whole world. Something within me blesses everything it touches, brings life and happiness and joy to everyone. Something in me acts as a healing balm, restoring everything to its natural and native perfection. As I silently listen to the Spirit within me and think of its perfection, I know that I am being born again, born into joy and hope and gladness, born into love and faith and assurance. Silently, I release every negative thought from my mind. I loose it and let it go, and I too pray that they may all be one, as thou, Father, art in me and I in thee, that they also may be one in us. And so it is.